we're gonna learn a lot about Marcus
Yeah.
Freeman. We're gonna learn a
Yep.
lot about Tommy Rees from a recruiting standpoint. What was their plan? Did they have something? Did they have a contingency in place? Because between CJ taking visits and Morian taking visits, there's no way they should have gone through this whole thing without having
As well as the transfers that happened prior to the season. Look, and Lawrence Keys has been gone for a couple of months, right? So they've had plenty of opportunity to try to replenish or try to look, in the 22 class, without guys being committed or trying to flip kids or whatever, to have a plan B or plan C, depending on how you look at it, right? They've had an opportunity to do that.
Right. And there's been some kids they've talked to, but talking to and actually recruiting a kid to the point where you could flip them when that time comes is a different conversation.
No question about it.
That's what they're going to have to do. And then, of course, Marcus Freeman's going to have to make a decision after the bowl game.
Right.
Because, what you don't do is, go in and because you're mad and go fire Dell Alexander right now, right? No, because right now the primary objective is have him help get this team ready to go win a bowl game, right? Because you've got to win the bowl game. So, that's
and you made a really good point in your article today about the wide receiver position. And I encourage everybody to go check that article out on irishbreakdown.com. But the point that stood out to me the most, and we can talk about the depth chart and the possibility of guys returning. We can talk about all of that. I wrote down best case scenario and worst case scenario. Right. It's a big difference, right?
Right.
But the point that I thought was really well put was that this is a huge opportunity to find out about Marcus Freeman. Mm-hmm. And this is his first big kind of decision to make. Yes, there was a big decision when it came to Coach Quinn, no question about it. But I think he feels pretty good about that, considering the amount of names that he's getting from people that are interested in that position. But I think the same thing could happen at wide receiver. And again, this is the side of the ball that he wasn't
from
on.
Someone on his staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, no, you're talking about Lance Taylor moving over to wide receivers. Yeah.
Right, and then hired a new running backs coach.
All kinds of possibilities.
I'm going to have a fun article out later today about what I wish, sort of I think Coach Freeman needs to make a splash at a couple spots, right? And make a couple splash hires. Names, big names is nice, but, big names can coach, right? Because big names that can't coach, doesn't do a whole lot for you.
Right.
But, getting some big names. And there's one scenario that I would love to see him do. And as far as I know, up to this point in time, there have been no conversations to this. So this isn't me leaking information. This is just me sharing my opinion, as I would love to see him move Lance Taylor to wide receivers and then open up the pocketbook to Tony Alford and say, hey, because here's the thing. Coach Alford loves Notre Dame, always says love Notre Dame. He didn't get along with Brian Kelly. Well, that's not a problem anymore. Right. So, and he has a relationship with Tommy Rees. Now, I don't know if it's a good one. I have no clue whether it's good or bad. No idea. Because he was obviously a position coach here for Tommy Rees's entire tenure. He was coaching receivers and running backs. I guarantee you he had interactions with the quarterback.
Right.
So, that would be like that dream scenario. But the reason I bring up Alford is there needs to be some sort of splash hire, because one of the things Coach Freeman has to do as the new head coach is he has to build on the momentum. Because if you don't build on this early momentum, and this is another article that I have coming out, like a strong finish equals, a strong beginning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For him. And you've got to build on that emotion. That's why winning this bowl game this is the most important non-playoff bowl game Notre Dame has had in a long time.
I agree.
I would say the only one that you could argue is similar is the two LSU games, simply because Notre Dame was in a spot in 2014 where if they lose that bowl game and they finish 7-6, we don't know if, who knows what happens with Brian Kelly after that, right? They needed that momentum. And then the same thing in 2017, if you lose 3 of your last 4, who knows how the offseason goes, right? Because that was the first year post-turnaround. You fade down the stretch, it's like, here we go again, right? They needed those 2 games. But I would argue this one is even bigger, for Notre Dame. So,
yeah, I think there's more riding on it, to be honest with you, and the momentum of a new head coach. The stories write themselves, right? If Marcus Freeman comes in his first game that he coaches, they win, the BCS / New Year's Six, bowl game that's been eluding them for, since I was in high school, right? That, again, the stories write themselves, right? And it would be a huge surge. There's no question about it.
You weren't in high school. You were in middle school.
Oh
The
my
last
gosh,
time
you're
they
right, 'cause
won a
93,
major bowl game was
right?
the January 1st of 1994.
You're right. I was in middle school.
I was a freshman in high school, and I'm about 5 years older than you are.
I was in middle.
You might have been in
okay, yeah.
elementary school, partner.
Well, so 94, I was in 7th grade. So
It'd have been January of 94. So
yeah, I was in 7th grade. Yep.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I have kids older than that now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
yeah,
of the story,
I think
it's been a while.
Yes, it's been a while. And again, the positive momentum coming out of a win like this is gigantic. It's absolutely huge. No question about that. So I agree with you on that one.
And so, Vince, but the splash can't just be about beating Oklahoma State, right? Because that win's only going to take you so far.
Sure.
Because it's a big win, but it's Oklahoma State, right? And it's
Mhm.
the Fiesta Bowl. The Fiesta Bowl is kind of bigger than your opponent. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Oklahoma State's a good football program. I think Mike Gundy's done a great job there, in my opinion.
Agreed.
But the perception is that they're not Ohio State, they're not Oklahoma, right? That'll be the perception. But it can't just be that. Look, coaching. A head coach is going to be defined ultimately by who he surrounds himself with.
Yeah.
And that's the next step, is not only that, but, and I've had, like, if y'all want to know why I'm not putting names out there, because I'm getting so many different names thrown at me. And like, I had a coach that I had a guy say, hey, I heard on good authority that they're talking to so-and-so. Well, I know coach so-and-so. So I texted him and said, hey man, what's the deal? You talking Notre Dame? He's like, I have literally not had a conversation with anybody.
Right.
Like, and this is someone who would tell me if that was
Sure.
happening, right? This is someone that I know and trust. And he's told me stuff like this before that was accurate. And because he knows I'll keep it between us, right? And so there's a lot out there that I don't put a lot of stock in. And that's why I haven't put a lot of names out, because I'm only going to put names out if I really got good sourcing on it. And that's just kind of what happens. It's like,
and permission. All that stuff, right? It's very important.
Exactly right. I'm not burning any sources or any friendships or anything like that to be first on something.
Right.
And I'm not saying anyone else is doing that. I'm not saying that at all.
No,
because there's other people out there doing the same thing, and so at least people that are doing it the right way. So that's but he's got to make a splash, right? And the staff is going to be part of it. Who does he hire as the O-line coach? Who does he hire as the skill position on, whether it's a running backs coach or receivers coach? Who's the D coordinator going to be?
Who's the linebackers coach?
Right. Does he promote Mike Ellison to D coordinator and hire someone to be the linebackers coach? Does he hire someone to be the linebackers or to be the D coordinator who coaches linebackers? Is he going to still be involved? I mean, who knows? Like, because Nick Saban for a long time at Alabama coached the corners. I mean, for a long time at Alabama.
Yeah. And he's very involved with the corners.
Right. But Nick Saban also was a head coach for a long time doing that, right? He was, he had been at Michigan State. He'd been at LSU. So it's not often that coach get to do that. But so those are the things we just don't know about Coach Freeman, because right now his priorities have been, first, finish up the recruiting class.
I don't think he knows.
Right? He genuinely doesn't.
Yeah, I will say this. I think in the handful of press conferences that we've had with Marcus Freeman, he is one of the most, at least appears to be, one of the most honest guys that I've seen up at a podium, right? Mm-hmm. And I think his responses are genuine. He's like, I get more comfortable as every practice goes along. And when we went to individual, he's like, I just kind of went to the linebackers because that's what I'm used to. Like,
that was funny.
I think that's legitimately how he feels. Like, when they were doing field goal, he's like, yeah, I usually stand behind the defense, but I made a point to stand behind the offense, and I noticed him standing right next to the kicker during the field goal. And he's honest and he's genuine, and at least up to this point. And there's a difference between not knowing what you're going to do and not, like, hey, I don't know. What are you doing about it? I haven't done anything about it yet. Yeah, right? No, I mean, there's conversations, there's things being on, but as far as who he's going to hire, he doesn't know. That doesn't mean they're not putting in work to hire. And I'll tell you something else. Here's something else I've been told. This is something I do feel comfortable saying, and I do feel is legitimate. I've been told that there's been a lot of people reaching out to him about positions. In the past, they've kind of had to beg guys, or not beg guys, but convince guys to come to Notre Dame. Yeah.
There's a lot of buzz about people wanting to come here and be a part of what's going on. Number one, they know that the roster's loaded. And number two, there's a different head coach in town, and Marcus Freeman, someone who has a really good relationship with a lot of assistant coaches, because he's been them. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He's been with them all. I mean, he's going to these clinics, he's going to these coaching conventions, he's going to all these type of things, and he's one of them. He's not some head coach that they feel they got to be different around because I may need to interview with this guy in a year or two. Right? That's what happens at these clinics. You see the assistant coaches at these clinics kind of act in a certain way when they're together, and then when a head coach, big name head coach, comes in, they all of a sudden they all change. Right? Like there was one time we were at a bar at a coaches convention. And there's all these assistant coaches talking around. Bob Stoops walks in, and of course they all kind of,
of course.
And it totally understand because they have to interview. You know, they may want to interview with him at some point in time.
Sure.
But when it's Marcus Freeman walks in and he's just the D coordinator at Cincinnati or Purdue or whatever else, it's going to be a connection. So they know him better,
right?
And so then they would know Brian Kelly because again, you just can't be yourself around Brian Kelly because he's a potential boss that you're trying to make an impression on. So it's just interesting how all those dynamics work, Vince. But, so there's a lot of people that know him that are going to want to work with him. Now, will they want to work with him enough to leave the jobs? Will Notre Dame offer enough? Those kind of things. I mean, there's still some wheeling. I may want to come work with you, but I'm not taking a $400,000 pay cut either. You know what I mean? So
that's fair.
It's going to be interesting. But like right now, his priority number one is finishing the recruiting class. Number two, winning the bowl game. Those are musts.
Yes,
absolute musts for Notre Dame.
Yep, because it just builds that foundation moving into the offseason and all of that, right? I mean, there's no question about it. And I mean, look, I'll say it. I mean, right now he's in the honeymoon stage with the media, and not that the media around Notre Dame is super duper critical, but at the same time, and it's the
whole fan base. It's the whole Notre Dame nation.
He's in a honeymoon, and if they win, that honeymoon gets extended.
Right.
Is what
if he makes splash hires, it gets extended.
Yes,
100%.
Exactly.
100%.
Yep.
And also that matters for recruiting when you talk about the 2023 class.
Absolutely.
And they won the Fiesta Bowl. Look who he hired at such and such position.
Right. And if we're talking about wide receiver, they need to have a great class in 23. No matter who comes back this year,
who
no
they
matter
get in the
what
transfer portal,
it doesn't matter. They need to knock the 23 class out of the park to bring us back full circle, right? I mean, that's a must at this point, regardless.
Right. Agree.